Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another episode of Out of Thin Air. My name is Beverly Luenia, and we have another exciting guest for you today. With me is my colleague, Nick Maldonado. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Great to have you. So, today we're going to be discussing all things IoT with one of our resident experts on this matter. So, Nick, again, glad to have you here. Can you kind of give us a brief overview of your role at Thin Air and just a brief introduction?
Yeah, definitely. Well, again, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I'm a revenue operations manager at Thin Air. I've been here for about 4 years now, and have kind of been all over the place in terms of what my roles have been. I started on our innovations team and then moved to be our founding sales engineer, and kind of building out that function, and then have come over to the revenue operations side of things. And basically, I'm the easiest way to describe it is I'm the liaison between our go-to-market teams, so like marketing, sales engineering, and product and R&D, and kind of bridge the two together so that everyone is kind of moving in the same direction, and kind of the process and operations that we have in place are moving correctly.
Right. So, it sounds like it's a very cross functional role that you have.
Yes, I'm dealing with every team every day.
That's great. Okay, let's start from the beginning. How would you define IoT and what most excites you about the industry?
Yeah, to me, IoT is just the ability to get offline things. We'll use the term things since it's in the word already. Uh, Bringing those offline things online and connecting them all within uh, a single network. So how I look at it is, right, there's two different meanings to the word. Some people look at IoT and they think about your smart refrigerator and coffee machine, but then there's industrial IoT, but you could just use the term IoT. It's kind of used differently by different people, but that's how I look at it, is just bringing these offline things online. And from an industrial side of things, where we're focused on it at Thin Air, it's really how do we bring the operational side of an organization. So that could be manufacturing from a shop floor. It could be from a healthcare perspective. It could be how our nurses and providers finding the tools and equipment that they need. So it really is just turning those things that are just items into something that can be digital and online. And what excites me the most of it is how more and it's becoming more and more accessible to industries, to organizations, and it's through a variety of different things. It's industries being more open to accepting new technology. It's also the fact that these new technologies are becoming commoditized and that you can just buy them off the shelves, and more organizations are coming with different focuses and what they want to do. So I think what excites me is the fact that there's going to be a lot more of these devices online telling us what our things are doing.
That's really interesting. And so, speaking of the different industries, what are some of the real world applications and use cases you've seen recently for IoT technology?
Yeah, I would say one of the main things is on the manufacturing side, and it's really connecting the shop floor. So, what we say at Thin Air is that about 70% of a shop floor, so to kind of paint the picture for people that aren't familiar with the inside of a manufacturing plant, think about, if you've ever watched shows on like the History Channel or the Food Network. I used to love the show Unwrapped, where they show how things are made. So, right, a bunch of machines and people and line workers building product, and there's storage areas in some of them, and these are large spaces. So, if you were to look from like an aerial view above it, 70% of it is offline, not sending data. I was just in a meeting the other day where a person who is selling to these organizations said 90% is what he's hearing. So we
Wow.
might even be like dialing it back a little bit, but
Mhm.
that's really the industry that I feel like is kind of growing the most, is manufacturing, where we're saying we have all of these dark spots or blind spots of digital data. How do we get them online? And IoT is the easiest answer because, how I mentioned it, it's becoming commoditized. You can buy sensors off the shelf, start putting them on things like a piece of material
Mm.
and see where it moves throughout the warehouse, or put it on an actual piece of production equipment and understand how it's running. So those are some of the real world applications that I'm seeing from like an asset tracking and asset monitoring standpoint.
So that's really interesting. So you've touched on manufacturing, and you mentioned wrap. So it's really easy to see how you can kind of take stock of a manufacturing floor or a plant. What about other industries like healthcare or agriculture? Are there any other like parallel use cases there?
Yeah, I think healthcare, you could see a lot of similarities between manufacturing and healthcare. Now, the line of work is obviously completely different, but they run into very similar issues where, right, manufacturing organizations, there could be times where, they need a specific tool or a specific part and they can't find it. It's lost. So they might have to repurchase. From the healthcare perspective, I mean, I know if I go to a hospital, I want the nurses, the techs, the doctors focused on critical patient care activities, not wondering, oh, where's the ultrasound machine or
Right.
where's the infusion pump? It's not where I know it's supposed to be. So that's a way that healthcare, um, it's an application that a lot of healthcare organizations are starting to get into, is tracking their tools. No different than what a manufacturing company is doing, no different than what an aviation company might be doing, tracking parts and tools in like an MRO facility. There's a lot of a lot of similarities in industries and verticals that are completely different.
So, are you seeing any successful implementations of these use cases? And are there any that you can kind of name in particular where, the consumer has been happy and you've seen any success?
Yeah, I could speak specifically to some of the things that we're doing at Thin Air, right? So we have um, DoD, CPG companies that we work with, and the goal when you're using this sort of technology in these manufacturing instances is to increase yield, any sort of productivity gain, increase capacity, and that's what we are seeing at one of our large DoD customers. So the ability for them to connect raw materials and parts and tools and know where they're located, know how they're moving between campuses and multiple buildings, then layering in how is my equipment running? What are the environmental conditions like temperature, humidity, air quality in these areas? And now that you have this like layer of data coming from the shop floor, you turn that 70% of offline to maybe 10% offline.
Mhm.
You now are able to start integrating that data into any existing system that you have, like an ERP or an MES, and then you can really start getting into the insights that drive these gains specifically. Um, one of our customers was quoted in saying that they increased capacity by 20 to 30%
Wow.
um, by integrating thin air technology into their day to day manufacturing operations.
Wow, that's amazing. So you've seen success. Have you seen any challenges with the implementations or just things that, you had to look out for and kind of iterate around?
Yeah, I would say it's like with any technology. There's going to be people that are at the beginning part of the curve, like, oh, I really want to get into this. I want my factory smart. I want robots everywhere. I want everything automated. Then you have the people that are going to be on the back end of it, like waiting to see what other organizations are doing, learn from the failures so they don't make the same mistake. So all of that is, I think, one of the top challenges is how are the people on the front lines, the operators that are really involved in the day to day, how do they get their leaders to buy into a specific initiative like this? And there's plenty that plenty of steps that you need to go through to be able to do that, from developing the business case to what's the actual problem to the solution and testing it and refining it and all that.
Hmm.
Um, Organizations that don't go through that seem to have more of a difficulty for the second area, which is adoption. So you have this technology and you have all of this data, but that data doesn't really mean anything if people aren't using it, or if people aren't trying to figure out ways that they can connect to maybe a system that they're currently working on. So building the business case and getting buy-in is before even purchasing this technology and rolling it out is one thing. Then it's once you have it and it's implemented, how are you getting people to use it on a day-to-day basis?
So, talk a little bit about the data analytics piece and the application with IoT.
Yeah, analytics is on everybody's mind because you have this data. How are you going to use it? And it can be from the simple things of statistical analysis to advanced predictive capabilities using AI, machine learning, all the fun buzzwords that we all get to talk about on a day to day basis. But it's going to be key because there's this the concept of getting your things connected is one thing, and you want to make sure you're connecting the right things to get the right data. Now that you have the right data, what are you going to do with it? So there's a variety of different ways that people leverage it. You could, and organizations have large business analysts teams, data scientists, software developers, where you know they say just push the data to a data lake in a repository where I can just pull from it, and we can let our teams go after it. Some people like, having more advanced AI capabilities. So whether they're building that in-house or, using thin air and our partner network to be able to build that, that's one avenue. And then low code, no code AI development tools are becoming more prevalent today. So really, from my perspective and from thin air's perspective, is we want to make it easy to get the data. That's step one. Step two is how do we give current state insight to operators? So it's not, well, now that things are connected, we got to wait 6 months to a year to get insights. It's like, no, you're connected. We'll give you today's insights. And then that data foundation is building in the background to be able to do it. So I would say it's going to be extremely important moving forward. People are interested in it. But I would also caution because a well thought out data strategy is extremely key when kind of getting into these initiatives.
So IoT is kind of its own lane. How does it interact with AI? As you mentioned, it's a buzzword. Everyone's interested in automating everything and artificial intelligence. How do the two interplay?
Yeah, I mean, it's a component of like the future state of Industry 4.0 or Industry 5.0 or smart factories, however you want to talk about it. And same thing with like healthcare, right? I mean, the hospital of the future. How are we bringing data from everywhere to be able to kind of get these advanced insights that we were never able to have in the past? So IoT is just a part of what AI needs. There's a lot of other aspects from robotics and automation tools, but from the IoT perspective, it's helping train models with complete data sets. Because if you're spending all this money on AI, tens
Hmm.
of hundreds of millions of dollars to launch an AI initiative, you want to make sure you're giving it the right data and you're giving it enough data that it's making proper recommendations or creating events and triggers that are relevant, and it's able to take the entire picture into mind, because there's a lot of different applications that you can use. You can use, large language models to analyze the data. That could be, useful for operators to ask what is actually happening current state with the data that you're collecting, which leads into predictive maintenance, path optimization when you're doing asset tracking. So there's a lot of cool applications that you can do, but you really can't even start thinking about it until you start getting the data and you have that foundation in place to collect it.
So would you say there's a data as a service aspect to what you do at Thin Air?
Yes, 100%. Our our goal is to make it easy and fast and
Mm.
non-disruptive to implement IoT. We really want it to be, you put in your infrastructure, which is, you know, days to be able to get it up and connect it to your network. We want to make it as easy that you're just sticking sensors on things, and then that data is coming in and it's ready to be used immediately. So yeah, I would say definitely data as a service is an area that we're extremely focused on, and then offering up that data in a no code, low code, a bit like way is extremely important.
All right, this is great. It's been really informative. What would you say now? This is the last question. What would you say to an organization or company out there that's interested in kind of starting the digital transformation journey? Maybe speak to a plant manager or a director of operations or even a CEO who's seeing what's happening in their industry and wanting to modernize or just adapt to new technologies. Like, how would you kind of plot a path forward for them?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is like assess the enterprise, understand where the issues lie. Because when you do that, you might realize you might have other things to focus on before. How do you start getting more data from your shop floor? There might be completely other facets of the day-to-day business that need to be optimized. I think it goes regardless of the industry you're in, regardless of the technology, not just IoT. The fact you don't want to just automate things for the sake of automating, because you could you could really put yourself in a position where you're doing it too early. So what
Mm.
I would say is take a step back, assess the enterprise. When you find what you can be working towards and what you can be improving, become laser focused and start with small pilots. That's what our customers have seen the most success. They start with one pilot that's focused on one issue, and then they layer in five other use cases, and then they layer in another five, and then they move it to a completely new location, and they start going through that process again. So I would say anybody that's interested, one, assess internally that there's a business case to do this, and then when you have determined that there is a path forward, find your vendor, hopefully thin air, and then you are able to implement that, and you're taking it in chunks that you are iterating on.
Wow, that's really informative. I think this is really useful for different companies out there that are looking to make that switch and that pivot. So, thank you so much, Nick, for joining us today and just sharing your knowledge about the industry and just ways that people can stay up to date on smart manufacturing and everything that's happening in the IoT world. So, really appreciate you joining us, and hopefully, you'll be back soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for putting this together.